Hey guys, tonight we begin a journey that starts in hunger and ends in faith. I'll tell you how famine emptied our land, how grief hollowed our hearts, and how two widows, one weary, one still learning, set out toward the foreign place called Moab. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening somewhere quiet tonight, post your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air was thin the day I left Bethlehem. You can almost feel the silence of empty baskets, the echo of footsteps down the stone paths where laughter used to live. Famine doesn't just take food, it takes the rhythm of life. I remember Naomi's face, carved with worry, but still strong enough to gather what remained and keep walking. I was a stranger then, just a young Moabite woman, watching her faith flicker like a lamp in the wind. We came to Moab because survival sometimes feels more urgent than belonging. There, between hills that caught the sun in a way Bethlehem never did, I met her sons. One of them became my husband, Malan. We built small happinesses, shared bread, quiet mornings, the kind of peace you don't realize you'll miss until it's gone. Then came the funerals. 3 graves. Naomi's husband first, then her sons, one after the other, as though sorrow had a schedule it refused to break. I remember sitting beside her, the earth still damp with loss, and feeling something shift inside me. Not just grief, but an understanding that love could outlast logic. She spoke often of home. Her voice carried the ache of olive trees and familiar roads, the smell of barley, and the comfort of neighbors who knew your name. She said she was going back, that there was bread again in Bethlehem. I could have stayed, found another husband among my people, rebuilt a small life, but something deeper than duty tugged at me. Maybe it was faith, or maybe it was the strange certainty that her God, the one she whispered prayers to when the moon was thin, had somehow noticed me too. She tried to send me away, her voice breaking in that motherly way that hurts more than anger ever could. She said, "Return to your people." But I couldn't. My heart already knew where it belonged. So I told her the words that would follow me forever. Where you go, I will go. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. That vow wasn't just love, it was surrender, the kind that takes your breath and replaces it with peace. We turned our faces toward Bethlehem, 2 widows with nothing but faith and a hope of mercy. The road back was long, dusty, and quiet. Sometimes Naomi would walk a few paces ahead, her shawl catching the wind like a sail guiding us home. I would hum to fill the silence, small tunes my mother used to sing, although I hardly remembered her face anymore. Travelers passed us, some curious, some indifferent. We were easy to overlook, 2 women, carrying grief like invisible luggage. When the walls of Bethlehem finally appeared over the ridge, Naomi paused. Her eyes shone with tears she refused to let fall. The people barely recognized her. Time and sorrow had redrawn her features. They whispered, "Is this Naomi?" And she answered softly, "Call me Mara, for the Lord has dealt bitterly with me." I wanted to tell them she was still beautiful, still strong, still Naomi, even under the weight of loss. But I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence is the only language grief understands. The barley harvest had just begun. Fields swayed in the warm light, gold against the weary brown of the soil. It smelled of new beginnings and hard work. The timing, Naomi said, was no accident. God's fingerprints often look like coincidence until you step back far enough to see the pattern. We found shelter in a small corner of her family's old home, though there was little to fill it. I remember thinking that the floor creaked like an old man's knees, and the walls sighed when the wind passed. Still, it was home, and for the first time in months, we slept without fear of what tomorrow could take away. In the early mornings, Naomi would murmur prayers, her voice soft but steady. I didn't understand all her words, but the tone carried a rhythm my heart had started to learn. She spoke to her God as though he listened, even when she was angry, even when she doubted. It made me wonder what it would be like to be known so completely by something invisible yet constant. Scholars still wonder whether famine in those days was purely natural or a spiritual reckoning, a reminder to turn hearts back to God. Maybe both. All I know is that hunger led us to Moab and loss led us home again. There's a kind of wisdom in walking when you don't know where the path ends. Each step becomes a small act of faith, a whispered yes to something unseen. That's what those early days felt like, one long yes in the middle of sorrow. Sometimes, when the night is still, I think about the way the stars looked over the Moab hills. So bright, so endless. They didn't seem to care which land they hung above, Israelite or Moabite. Maybe that's the first time I realized God's sky stretches over everyone. And under that same sky, Naomi and I stepped quietly into Bethlehem again. The smell of barley on the breeze felt like an unspoken welcome. We didn't know what waited in those fields, or who. But I like to think heaven already smiled at what was about to unfold.
The mornings in Bethlehem began with the whisper of wind over barley fields. You can almost feel it, the brush of grain against your fingertips, the cool breath of dawn carrying the scent of earth and hope. Naomi and I would wake before the sun, her sighs filling the silence, while I tied my shawl and wondered what work the day might bring. Our cupboards were nearly empty, but her faith was steady enough to keep us standing. Still, hunger isn't patient. One morning, as the light spilled gold through the cracks of our door, I asked her quietly if I might go and glean, gather the fallen stalks behind the harvesters as the law of her people allowed. She hesitated. The way she looked at me, torn between fear for me and pride in my courage, made my chest ache. Then she nodded. "Go, my daughter," she said, her voice like the soft closing of a prayer. So I went. The road to the fields curved past olive groves and low stone fences, alive with birdsong. Every step felt like stepping into a story I didn't yet understand. The harvesters' laughter reached me before I saw them. Young men swinging sickles, women bundling sheaves, the rhythm of community at work. And there I was, the foreigner, walking into a dance I didn't know the steps to. I chose a field at random, or so I thought. Later, Naomi would say that no step guided by faith is ever truly random. It belonged to a man named Boaz, a relative of her late husband, though I didn't know it then. I only knew that the foreman eyed me carefully as I asked permission to glean. "You may follow the women," he said at last. "Don't stray from the rows." His tone was polite but wary. Bethlehem was small, and strangers carried stories before they spoke a word. So I kept my head low and my hands busy. The stalks bent easily, soft against my palms, and as I worked, I listened to the rustle of grain, the murmur of voices, the rhythm of my own breath finding peace in labor. There's something holy about honest work, something that stills the mind even as it tires the body. When Boaz arrived, I felt it before I saw him, the subtle hush that follows respect. His voice carried warmth, like sunlight filtered through olive branches. He greeted his workers, "The Lord be with you," and they answered, "The Lord bless you." I remember pausing mid-motion, surprised at how faith lived in their everyday words, not locked away in temple walls. He noticed me almost immediately. I saw his shadow before his eyes. "Whose young woman is this?" he asked the foreman, not with suspicion, more like curiosity touched with kindness. When he learned I was the Moabite who came with Naomi, his face softened. He walked over, slow and sure, his sandals stirring the dust. He said, "Listen, my daughter," his tone careful, gentle. "Don't go to another field. Stay here with my servant girls. I've told the men not to bother you. And when you're thirsty, drink from the jars they fill." I bowed so low I could taste the earth. I asked, "Why have I found favor in your eyes? I'm a foreigner." He smiled, kindly, without pity. He said, "I've heard what you've done for Naomi, how you left your family, your land to come among a people you did not know. May the Lord, under whose wings you have come for refuge, reward you fully." Those words settled into me like rain into dry soil. Under his wings, the image lingered, warm, safe, vast. For the first time since Moab, I felt seen not as a stranger, but as someone gathered into grace. The day stretched long, but his kindness made it lighter. When mealtime came, he called me to sit with the workers. I almost refused, not out of humility, but pride. But hunger overruled hesitation. He passed me roasted grain himself, laughing softly when I took less than I should. "Eat," he said, "there's plenty." There was. More than food, there was belonging. By sunset, my arms ached from gathering, but the ache felt honest. I carried home nearly an ephah of barley, enough to feed us for days. When Naomi saw the bundle, her eyes widened in disbelief. She asked, "Where did you glean today? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." When I said his name, she stilled. "Boaz," she repeated slowly, her voice trembling just enough for me to notice. "He is one of our kinsmen redeemers." I didn't understand the full weight of that word, redeemer. I only knew it sounded like rescue wrapped in promise. That night, as we sorted the grain, Naomi's eyes glimmered with something I hadn't seen since before Moab. hope. She told me of the law that allowed a near relative to marry a widow to restore the family's name and inheritance. She advised, stay close to his fields. It may be that the Lord has not forgotten us after all. The thought felt too fragile to speak aloud, but in my heart I whispered a prayer anyway. Not for a husband, not yet, but for the courage to keep walking the path God had placed before me. The next days followed the rhythm of harvest, work, rest, gratitude. I gleaned under the same sun, in the same field, watched over quietly by the same man who spoke blessings like breathing. There were glances, brief but kind, and a warmth I didn't dare name. Scholars later noted how Israel's gleaning law, an act of compassion for the poor, was unique among ancient nations. Some think it mirrored the heart of a God who always leaves space for mercy amid the reaping. I like that. It makes me feel as though even then grace was being gathered right alongside the barley. Sometimes, when the day ended and the stars returned, I would sit outside with Naomi, our hands brushing the golden grain spread to dry. I told her once, you were right, he is kind. She smiled faintly, her wrinkles softening in the starlight. She said, kindness is how God hides miracles in plain sight. And somewhere beyond those quiet words, the night hummed with the sound of harvest, of laughter, of hearts being prepared for something larger than either of us could yet see.
The days in Boaz's fields blurred into one gentle rhythm. Sunrise, work, kindness, rest. You could almost lose yourself in the pattern, the soft clatter of sickles, the hum of voices rising with the wind. I liked that rhythm. It was steady, safe, and though I didn't dare admit it then, it made my heart beat a little differently when I saw him walking through the rows. Boaz had a way of noticing people without making them feel small. When he looked at you, it wasn't curiosity or pity, it was recognition. As though he saw not where you came from, but who you were becoming. I used to wonder if that's how God looked at us too. Eyes that understood both the ache and the purpose in every step. Sometimes while I worked, I caught myself glancing his way. He'd be speaking with the foreman or checking the grain, his voice calm, his presence quietly sure. The other workers respected him, not because he demanded it, but because he earned it. His laughter was rare but real, and when it came, it sounded like a prayer answered softly. He never made a show of his kindness. If I stumbled, he looked away to spare me embarrassment. If I lagged behind, he'd send one of the women to slow their pace so I wouldn't feel left out. Once I overheard one of the men whisper, "Boaz treats her like she belongs." It made my chest tighten, not from shame, but from something that felt suspiciously like gratitude. In the evenings, after I brought home the grain, Naomi would ask questions in that gentle, probing way of hers. "Did he speak to you today?" she'd ask, her tone innocent, but her eyes gleaming. "Only to bless the work," I'd answer, pretending not to notice the small smile tugging at her lips. She was watching something unfold, something she believed heaven had already written. I was slower to believe, cautious in my hope. Love, I had learned, could vanish as quickly as it bloomed. But faith was different. Faith could linger even in the silence.
One afternoon, when the harvest was nearly finished, Boaz called the workers together for a meal. The air was thick with the scent of roasted grain and sweat, the kind of ordinary holiness that comes from honest labor. I sat with the women, my hands still dusty, when he approached carrying a bowl of parched corn. "Here," he said simply, offering it to me first. His eyes held mine just long enough for my pulse to skip a beat. I smiled, small and uncertain. He smiled back. There was nothing bold in the moment, just quiet recognition, a shared understanding that needed no words. Later that day, I heard laughter ripple through the field. Boaz had given instructions to his men. He said, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and pull out some stalks from the bundles and leave them for her." I blushed when I realized it wasn't charity, it was gentleness disguised as generosity. He wanted to protect my dignity while easing my burden. That kind of grace stays with you. As the sun dipped low, painting the fields in honey and amber, I found myself standing still for a moment, just watching. The barley swayed in rhythm with the evening breeze, like the earth itself was exhaling after a long day. Somewhere behind me, Boaz's voice carried over the laughter. It struck me then how rare it was to find peace in another's presence without the need to speak. That night, Naomi was waiting at the door, her eyes sharp with purpose. "He's shown you favor," she said, her tone part statement, part invitation. I nodded, unsure how to put the day into words. "He's kind," I said simply. Her lips curved into that knowing smile again. "Kindness can be a calling, Ruth," she murmured, "and sometimes it's an answer." I didn't fully understand what she meant until much later, but that night, as I lay awake listening to the wind sigh against our window, I found myself whispering Boaz's name into the darkness, not as a wish, but as a prayer of gratitude. Scholars often note how in ancient Israel, gleaning laws were a social safety net rooted in divine compassion. But in our story, they became more than law. They became the setting for love's quiet beginning. Some even call that season the first recorded glimpse of grace in action. I think they're right. The days that followed were lighter. Naomi hummed again when she cooked. I laughed more easily, even at small things. Once, when I tripped over my own hem and dropped half a bundle, I caught Boaz grinning from across the field, trying not to laugh. I rolled my eyes at him, and for a heartbeat, it felt like joy had remembered my name. When the last of the barley was gathered, I knew something was changing. The harvest would end soon, and with it, my daily reason to be near him. The thought settled like dust, quiet, unwelcome, impossible to shake. That evening, Naomi sat beside the fire, her face lit by the soft orange glow. "The harvest is finished," she said, not looking up. I nodded, twisting my shawl between my fingers. "Yes." "Then it's time," she said. "Time for what?" Her eyes met mine, and there was both love and strategy in them. The threshing floor. "Tonight Boaz will be there winnowing barley. You'll go to him, my butter, but not as a beggar, as a woman of faith." I stared at her, my pulse quickening.
Go to him? Naomi, what will people say? People will talk no matter what, she replied, a small knowing smile at her lips. But God writes his stories in whispers before they ever reach the marketplace. That night, sleep wouldn't come. My thoughts tangled between fear and faith, between the safety of waiting and the risk of stepping forward. Outside, the wind rustled through the barley fields, as if the earth itself was urging me onward. I didn't know then what the threshing floor would bring, only that obedience often looks like courage dressed in humility. And, as the moon rose high, pale and watchful, I gathered my resolve and a clock of faith to carry me into the next chapter of God's strange, tender plan.
The moon that night hung low and white, like a watchful eye over the fields. Its silver light spilled across the hills, tracing every stalk of barley, every curve of the threshing floor. I remember the air being cool and still, the kind of stillness that holds its breath before something sacred begins. Naomi's instructions echoed in my mind as I walked. She had said, "Wash, anoint yourself, and put on your cloak," her voice trembling with both wisdom and risk. "Wait until he's finished eating and drinking, then go. Uncover his feet and lie down. He'll tell you what to do." I had nodded, though inside me 100 doubts had gathered like restless birds. What if he misunderstood? What if the worker saw me and whispered? What if kindness didn't mean what I hoped it did? But beneath all those fears was one steady note of faith. Naomi believed this was more than chance. It was providence quietly taking shape. I moved slowly, each step a prayer. The threshing floor was alive with faint sounds, men laughing softly after the feast, the rhythmic thud of grain tossed into the air, separating from its husk. Boaz was there, his silhouette outlined by the flicker of a small fire. When the work was done, he ate, drank, and lay down beside a pile of grain, content and weary. I waited until the voices faded and the night deepened. Then, heart pounding, I crept closer. Every sound seemed louder, the rustle of my cloak, the crunch of straw beneath my feet, the small hitch of my own breath. I could smell the warm scent of barley mixed with dust and smoke, and I remember thinking that even the earth seemed to be holding its breath with me. When I reached him, I kneeled. My fingers trembled as I lifted the edge of his blanket and lay down at his feet. The ground was cool, rough beneath the thin fabric of my cloak. My pulse echoed in my ears like a drum. I wasn't there to seduce or to shame. I was there to seek shelter, the kind promised under God's law, the kind Naomi believed could restore not just our lives, but our place in the story of Israel itself. For a long time, he didn't move. The night hummed around us, and I thought maybe he'd sleep until dawn, never knowing I'd been there. Then he stirred. A startled gasp. He turned, half awake, his hand reaching for his cloak.
"Who are you?" he voiced. His voice was rough with sleep, but not unkind. I swallowed, my mouth dry. "I am Ruth, your servant," I whispered. "Spread your garment over me, for you are a kinsman redeemer." The silence after that was a lifetime wrapped in seconds. Then slowly he sat up. The firelight caught his face, surprise first, then something softer, something like awe. "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter," he said at last. "You have shown more kindness now than before, because you did not go after younger men, whether rich or poor." His tone carried both reverence and relief. He paused, studying me with that same steady gaze that once saw me in the fields. "Do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. Everyone knows you are a woman of noble character." The words settled over me like a mantle, warm, reassuring, heavy with meaning. Noble character. He didn't see me as foreign or desperate, but as worthy, chosen. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just a story about marriage. It was a story about redemption, the quiet kind that begins when someone dares to believe God can write beauty out of brokenness. Still, he was careful, honorable. He said, "There is another man, a closer relative. If he will redeem you, good, let him. But if he will not, as the Lord lives, I will redeem you." He looked out toward the fields, as if speaking to the dawn that hadn't yet come. Then he lay back, keeping a respectful distance between us. "Rest until morning," he said softly. And I did. The ground beneath me felt different now, no longer the place of risk, but of promise. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called, and the steady rhythm of Boaz's breathing reminded me that peace could come even in uncertainty. Just before dawn, he stirred again. "Before anyone recognize you, go," he whispered. He handed me 6 measures of barley wrapped in his cloak. "Don't return to your mother-in-law empty-handed." The gesture wasn't about food. It was a message, both to Naomi and to me. You won't return empty anymore. When I reached home, Naomi was waiting at the door, as though she hadn't slept at all. I told her everything: the threshing floor, Boaz's words, the promise yet to be fulfilled. Her eyes shone, and she smiled a smile that seemed to gather up every prayer she had ever prayed. "Wait, my daughter," she said, her voice calm now, "for the man will not rest until he has settled the matter today." And so we waited. It's funny how stillness can feel heavier than motion. The hours stretched like threads of uncertainty, each one pulling at my heart. Yet underneath it all there was peace, a deep trembling peace that felt like the quiet before sunrise. Some believe the threshing floor scene was symbolic, that uncovering Boaz's feet meant seeking divine protection, not merely human affection. Others say it was a moment of bold faith disguised as an ancient custom. Maybe both are true. I only know that I lay down in fear and arose up in hope. Even now, I can still feel that night, the smell of the grain, the hush of the wind, the trembling courage that somehow turned into peace. It was the night when obedience became love's language, and love became God's gentle answer to everything we had lost.
Morning came soft and quiet, painting the barley fields in gentle gold. I awoke with the memory of the night pressing softly against me, a rhythm that stayed even as the sun climbed the sky. Naomi had risen before me, moving like a shadow through our small home, and when I slipped from the door, the village itself seemed to exhale in welcome. Boaz was already at the city gate, his robes catching the morning light as he sat among the elders. The gate was more than an entrance. It was the place where agreements became binding, where witness and word carried weight beyond the immediate. I remembered Naomi's instructions. Go now, my daughter, let the law speak, and the truth of your courage follow it. I approached cautiously, feeling both fear and resolve. In my hands, I carried the modest gifts of barley from the previous night, a tangible sign of the night's promise. The elders glanced up, nodding politely, and then returned to their deliberations, as if they could feel that the story unfolding was bigger than them. Boaz noticed me immediately. His eyes widened just slightly, a spark of recognition passing between us, and then he gestured for me to sit beside him. The air was thick with expectation, yet calm, like the pause between one note and the next in a song you've longed to hear. I knelt before him, lowering my gaze in the custom of respect, and laid my request before him, that he might act as our family's kinsman redeemer. He listened attentively, nodding slowly, and then addressed the elders with careful words, outlining the law, acknowledging the nearer relative, and declaring his intent to redeem if the other declined. There was a weight in the ritual that made my heart pound, the formality, the witnesses, the law's meticulous care. But it was also gentle, protective. Each gesture carried a quiet dignity, and I felt the presence of something greater than human law. It was God's providence guiding each measured step, turning ancient custom into an act of grace. The closer relative initially agreed, then withdrew when he learned it would affect his own inheritance. It was strange, almost miraculous, how the law, which could have been rigid and cold, instead became the channel for mercy. Boaz leaned toward me, his smile warm but restrained, and confirmed what my heart had already begun to hope. He said, "You may be assured, the Lord has made a way. You shall be redeemed, and your place in our people restored." I could hardly speak, only nodding, overwhelmed with gratitude and awe. His words were not boastful or hurried. They carried the calm certainty of someone who trusts in God's timing. I realized then that love and law, human action and divine will were interwoven in ways I could scarcely measure. As we walked from the gate together, the elders nodding in approval behind us, I marveled at how ordinary actions, offering grain, laying a cloak, speaking a word of kindness,
had led to this morning of restoration. The same hands that had gathered barley now held the promise of family, of lineage, of home renewed. Boaz's gentleness never faltered. He treated me as a partner in the unfolding story, never as a passive beneficiary. In his manner, I sensed a profound understanding. Faithfulness and courage are not solitary virtues. They are woven through relationships, nurtured by trust and mutual respect. Scholars often remark on the legal structure in Ruth, noting how kinsman-redeemer customs balance justice and mercy. But for me, it was never abstract. It was lived. Every glance, every careful word, every step we took together at the city gate bore witness to the intertwining of divine and human hearts. Some believe the whole scene demonstrates that God delights in using small, careful acts to accomplish greater plans, an idea I now carry with me like a talisman. By the time we returned to Naomi, the sun had fully risen, bathing Bethlehem in warmth. The village seemed to hum with life, neighbors already at work, children's laughter drifting from the streets, the air perfumed with early morning bread and freshly tilled soil. I carried the joy quietly in my chest, savoring the deep, unspoken knowledge that our family was restored, our future secure. And Naomi embraced me then, her arms strong and warm, and whispered, "The Lord has not abandoned us." Her words were soft, but they echoed like a chorus in my soul. I realized that night and morning were not just moments in time, but a rhythm of God's faithfulness stitched into the very fabric of our lives. And though the city gate had been the place of law and witness, it had also become a place of prayer answered, of courage honored, of hearts united under divine guidance. The barley fields had been my classroom, the threshing floor my sanctuary, and now the gate marked the threshold of a life renewed, a life ready to nurture love, family, and faith. Even as I recount these moments, I can feel the gentle sun on my shoulders, the soft whisper of barley in the breeze, and the quiet certainty that God's plans unfold in ways we can neither rush nor force. The story continues, unseen threads weaving through time, guiding those willing to walk in faith, kindness, and courage.
Life after that morning settled into a rhythm both gentle and profound. Bethlehem seemed different now. Its hills no longer just the backdrop of a weary return, but a living tapestry of God's quiet providence. The barley fields, once the measure of survival, now whispered promise in the wind. I walked them with a heart unburdened, carrying the knowledge that faith, courage, and small acts of kindness had intertwined to shape our future. When Boaz and I returned to Naomi's house that day, the air felt lighter. She had prepared this small meal, though her hands trembled with excitement. "Sit, my daughter, for today is not just any day." The weight of the morning's events rested on us, but it was sweet, like the taste of freshly baked bread, warm and sustaining. I remember holding Obed in my arms, his tiny body soft and warm, and feeling the magnitude of what had begun. A child, yes, but more than that, a living link between generations, a reminder that the story of love and faith continues in ways far beyond our understanding. Naomi's eyes glistened as she whispered blessings over him, her voice carrying both gratitude and awe. Sometimes at night, I think about the ripple of moments that brought us here. The famine that drove us from Moab, the kindness of strangers, the labor in the fields, the brave steps on the threshing floor. All of it seemed orchestrated by a hand unseen, yet faithful. Scholars still ponder how such ordinary circumstances led to extraordinary legacy, yet for me it has always felt like a miracle quietly threading itself through daily life. Boaz and I worked together to nurture Obed, teaching him faith, humility, and the importance of community. The villagers would often comment on the gentle manner in which he grew, the reflection of kindness in his eyes, and I would smile quietly, knowing that the lineage we were now part of carried stories far older than any single generation. The harvest cycles returned, each year painting the fields in the same golden rhythm. I walked among the barley, now familiar beneath my feet, and sometimes traced the paths where I had gleaned, where Boaz's eyes first noticed me. The earth remembered our hands, the grain remembered our labor, and in that memory I felt the steady pulse of God's presence. We spoke often of faith, of the God who orchestrates events beyond understanding, who takes the simplest acts, gathering grain, showing kindness, offering respect, and turns them into legacies. Some call it divine design, others chance guided by providence. I call it mercy, tangible and warm, resting in the quiet spaces between ordinary days. Obed grew under that mercy, and as he did, I often thought of how our small story would flow into something greater. Naomi reminded me gently, "This is but the beginning, Ruth. Your courage and faith echo farther than we can see." And she was right. Every life touched, every word spoken in kindness, every obedient step walked in faith, ripples outward, unseen but enduring. I can still see Bethlehem at dusk, the village settling into its nightly hush, the scent of barley still lingering, the wind carrying both past and promise. The memory of Boaz's steady kindness, the courage of that threshing floor night, and the blessing of our child remain vivid. These moments, though long ago, are like the gentle hum of a lullaby, soft, persistent, carrying reassurance across time. And as I reflect on all that has happened, I understand that life is often measured not by grand gestures, but by faithfulness in small moments. Each choice, each act of courage, each whisper of love carries weight beyond what we can imagine. Our lineage, now part of a larger story, stretches forward in ways I cannot fully see, yet I trust in the God who guides it. Even now, I close my eyes and feel the barley fields beneath my feet, hear the wind rustling through the stalks, and sense the quiet miracle of lives intertwined by faith and kindness. And as the last light fades, you realize the story never truly ends. It simply rests, waiting for another soul to listen. May you too find courage in quiet moments, faith in uncertain paths, and the gentle reassurance that small acts of obedience and love can echo far beyond what you can imagine. Be grateful. Rest well.
and trust that mercy and kindness will continue to guide your steps.
And now, as the day slips quietly into night, let yourself rest in the warmth of this story. The fields are still, the barley whispers softly in the wind, and every gentle act we have witnessed reminds us that life moves forward under the care of a loving hand. You have walked beside me, seen the courage it takes to follow faith, and felt the quiet miracles hidden in ordinary moments. Take a deep breath, letting the rhythm of the earth and the memory of God's provision fill you with peace. Remember that courage can be humble, kindness can ripple through generations, and love, guided by faith, can restore hearts, families, and hope itself. Even when the path seems uncertain, the smallest steps taken with devotion can shape destinies far greater than our eyes can see. Rest now, knowing that stories like ours continue beyond the pages, carried in hearts willing to listen. May your sleep be gentle, your dreams calm, and your spirit comforted by the quiet presence of grace. Be thankful for this pause, for the soft hum of life around you, and for the everlasting care that surrounds us all.